everybody, welcome to BrickVault. Today I get to show you guys a lot of different Star Wars Nano ships. These custom builds are meant to scale with two Impaired's giant Lego Eviscerator Star Destroyer. The instructions for that came out about a month ago, and the designer also developed a lot of ships that are meant to scale exactly with the same build. I've also included some extra smaller ships to also scale with this, like the Falcon and the Ghost, and at the end of this video I'll show you guys a couple of different setups that we did in terms of battle dioramas for the much larger Eviscerator Star Destroyer. And before I jump into the details of these nano scale models, let me first say if you did want to build these creations for yourself, the instructions can be found at our web store www.brickvault.toys, linked in the description below. With each purchase comes the PDF step-by-step building instructions, as well as a parts list for ordering all the pieces that you'll need. Buying instructions is a great way to help support what we do here at the channel, and it also really supports the designers that we work with, like Two Impaired. So jumping into the details now, you guys may have been able to guess, this is the Empire versus the Rebels, and there are three builds for either side that are roughly the same size to make the battle look somewhat equal. Though I'm sure you guys can argue about firepower in the comments below. On the Empire side, we've got a couple of TIE fighters. Then the mid-size build are two Gozanti class cruisers, and the larger one is the Arquitens class light cruiser. On the Rebels side, the smallest of the builds is a pair of two GR75s, then a CR90 Corvette, with the largest of the ships being a Nebulon B. Let's take a look at the Rebels ships first, and let's start off with the Nebulon B because I like this ship a lot. It was originally intended to be part of the Imperial Navy, but at some point several of them were taken by the Rebels, and this ship ended up serving the Rebels ultimately for the duration of the Galactic Civil War. This ship certainly is one of the strangest looking ones from Star Wars, at least in my opinion. It's just such an odd combination of shapes, and in terms of a dirty looking Star Wars ship, this probably takes the cake. The front pods and columns that stack downwards is by far its most distinctive feature, and I like the different subtle color alterations that you can see moving down along the front. The construction here is very simple and super solid. You'll notice that amongst all of the different ships, in fact, as I go through this episode, and the detailing of different slopes and plate pieces along the front nose is my favorite part of the ship, though I am a big fan of how Two Impaired also created the engines in the back. The Nebulon B connects to its stand in two different little points. We have a trans clear inkwell at the bottom that connects into an open stud, and then there's another trans bar piece that connects into one of those inverted 1x3 tiles. There are no exposed studs on this little micro build, which is fun. And then last minute I decided to modify the Nebulon B ever so slightly so you could have the Falcon attached to it, similar to how you see at the end of Empire Strikes Back. But let's move on now to the CR90 Corvette. It's also known as the Blockade Runner, and it's one of my personal favorite ships from the entire Star Wars universe. This design was actually meant to be what the original Millennium Falcon should have been, but they changed it. And there's a few very subtle details that Two Impaired added onto this ship that I think really pull it apart from some of the other micro builds. My two favorite details for sure in this ship is his use of the different stud shooters that make up the engines in the back. Then I also very much appreciate the use of that rocket piece with those fins sticking out on four sides. They're kind of offset so they match up with the corners of the bricks, and that too also follows a very accurate point of detail as well when you look up close with the original model. In general, the proportions and angles are very accurate, especially for such a small scale that this is built at. It's a super fun build, probably my favorite of all the ships. And let's move on to the lightest of the Rebels. This is the GR75 medium transport. Don't ask me why they're in every single space battle almost. There's a few really fun design choices made for this ship. In the front, we have that great exposed nose. When you look at it head on, you'll see two different color variations. That's because the bottom of the GR75 is full of a bunch of different multicolored crates, so he highlighted that by changing it up a little bit with different 1x1 plates. The armor plating has a break in the side to top sections, which you can see with those little 1x2 plates with ellipse. The binocular pieces outline the engines decently well, and the little white skating shoe works pretty well to highlight the bridge. Okay, let's jump right in to the Imperial side. Let's start off again with the largest build. We have the Arquitens class light cruiser. Also, you notice it wobbled for a second. This one is not attached to the stand. It just kind of rests at center gravity here on a couple of 1x2 tiles. And the detailing here works pretty darn well. As you pan across the top, you'll see a few of the cannons. The bridge pokes out along the top just by a plate or two. And there's a great use of those triangular tiles as well to match up a few of the different layers that float along the top of this somewhat Star Destroyer-esque looking ship, though it is actually quite different. By far my favorite bit of building is in the back by the engines. Used an older piece to make that particular little angle there, and it's snapped on in a very clever way. In universe, the ship is quite long and relatively thin, thinner than a Star Destroyer would be at its size, and just like the bottom when you look at the ship, there are no exposed studs, and the details are just as pronounced, which is nice because if you want to display this higher up and people see it from the bottom, it'll still look how it is completely meant to look in universe. But let's move on now to the medium size build. We have a pair of Gozanti class cruisers, and my favorite bit of building in terms of technique is 2 Impaired's way of attaching the TIE fighters to the bottom of these cruisers. It's very simple but very effective. Nothing on this ship will break away easily, and you got a surprising amount of variable detail along the top, even though they're such small builds. Very quickly moving on to the last of the light builds for the Empire, we've got 3 TIE fighters flying in tandem. This build here is relatively straightforward, pretty self-explanatory. The gray modified plate gets hidden somewhat in those trans pieces that attach on both the top and the bottom, and it's a nice way to display just a cluster of a few TIE fighters flying out to attack the rebels. Now, I'm nowhere near the end of the episode, but very quickly, let me show you guys the handling section of this video. It's going to be pretty darn quick. You can pick up any of these builds quite easily. The TIE fighters are, of course, very strong. The Gozantis are really strong. You can't pick them up, I guess, by the ship because, of course, they're only studded in by 1 bar piece, but really, really solid builds, though. You can hold it, shake it around, do whatever you like. And then when it comes to the light cruiser, remember, it's not studded into the stand. You pick it up and it will detach automatically, but it's a really, really strong build. The weakest point is the space between the 3 engines and the body, though it isn't actually particularly weak. The Nebulon B, though it's a strange and very thin shape at certain points, is still super strong. CR90, same thing. You can hold the ship by any point, and here are the CR95s. The side paneling is attached by 1 stud, so they can sort of tilt up and down a little bit, and that is basically all you need to know about handling any of these micro builds. Now, before I set up the dioramas, here are just some extras just to make a fun fighting diorama, and I also modified a couple of things here and there, so let me show you what happened. This is a TIE fighter getting blown up by a red laser shot. It's not the greatest build, but we have an Imperial shuttle that does scale properly, so that was fun, even though it does look a little bit funky. Here are just some TIE fighters that are connected together. I've got an indication of how to fire a laser shot if you like. And then this is a CR90 attached to the Ghost. I did make a small micro scale Ghost. I think it actually scales pretty darn well, especially if you take a look at some of the screenshots of those ships together. And then I used the display stand pieces that came from the latest DC minifigure collectible series to show some TIE fighters breaking away from a Gozanti. That's a fun little detail, though you can use that piece for a lot of different things at this scale. And then this is the Millennium Falcon. Some of these you've seen in the Imperial Star Destroyer video. All of this stuff is included in the instructions if you wanted to get them. And oh yeah, I almost forgot, this is a TIE bomber made with a binocular piece. That one might be slightly upscaled compared to some of the others, but it looks really fun. And now it's time to take everything that we see here, set them up in the other room to make a battle diorama with the Eviscerator Star Destroyer. Now, approximately 1.5 minutes later, we have a battle scene set up with very little to no modifications aside from the TIE fighters breaking away from the Gozanti. The Ghost is still attached to the CR90, and that's just about it. This is what it looks like when everything is set up along the stands. It's not bad, especially when you start to pull away and you can see the whole Star Destroyer above it. It's still a pretty decent way to check out all these ships together. Everything scales properly, but I think it's time to change things up and make things feel like a little bit more action is happening. I rose the Nebulon Nebulon B quite a bit. It's about parallel with the Star Destroyer. The Ghost is detached and flying on its own. A lot of the stuff down below looks pretty similar. The Arquitens has been raised up slightly, and then along the top we've got a shuttle with 2 TIE fighter escorts. Perhaps he's a target for the rebels. One of the Gozantis is up by the bridge. A few of the TIE bombers are flying in. Perhaps they're going to go after the CR90. Then the Gozanti is releasing its TIE fighters, probably at a relatively low altitude. It should be a little bit higher up there. The TIE fighter is taking a shot at the CR90 Corvette, and as we move back, we've got the Falcon blowing up another one of the TIE fighters. This was just a really basic, very quick change up. All I did was basically add a lot of different trans 1x2 bricks and perhaps just 1 or 2 other trans pieces that are being used to hold the ships up above the Star Destroyer. But that was a very quick addition to this already absolutely amazing model. It now feels like there's a little bit more life happening. I know I'm going to be changing up this battle diorama more in the future. And remember guys, if you wanted to build these ships for yourself at the new Nano scale, roughly 1375:1, you can check us out at BrickVault.toys. Click that link in the description below if you want to learn more. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and if you enjoy our content, you can always like or subscribe. We'll see you next time at BrickVault. Hey, if you like seeing our LEGO creations and or collections online, they're even more impressive in person. Our LEGO studio in San Diego is now open on the weekends. Click the link in the description below for more information or if you want to schedule a tour.